Scott, so you're from Melbourne. How did you get into football, you know, at the very beginning, and how did you end up in the UK?
It was quite a funny one, to be fair. I was playing back at home and I got some good advice from my parents when I was still playing, and they said, why don't you go to university at some point and study? So I looked at that avenue for a while, and whilst I was studying, I had no ambition or real understanding where that would take me, whether or not that would take me back home and I'd stay in Australia. But then suddenly it was actually someone else in my class one day said, I want to work in the Premier League, I want to do this and this and that. And I went, hang on a minute, I've got more of a football background than you. So then suddenly I started thinking, and I started working with smaller teams in Melbourne. And then it was one of those little moments where I thought, hang on, let's do it. So I bought a one-way ticket and I moved over to Australia with one contact. I only knew one person here at the time, and that was my cousin, so I lived with her for a little period of time. And then an Australian at the time, and a guy named Steve Nance, who was involved with the Wallabies for quite some time. He was a performance director for Fulham for about 3 or 4 years, and had a cup of coffee with him. And at the time there was an opportunity to work with the academy. But that was purely voluntary, so I went in there off my own back and supported myself and did some voluntary work there for about 3 to 4 months. And then on the back of that work and showing what I could do, he offered me a position. And then it kicked off from there, to be fair. It kicked off the 2007 season. And within 3 or 4 weeks I was actually working in the first team because someone actually left the department. And so to be 26, 27 at that time, I was actually moved into the first team, and I haven't looked back since then.
And you came in through the academy, as you said, and came in the first team. You've worked with some great managers, you know, Roy Hodgson, you've worked with Mark Hughes, you've worked with Martin Yole. Tell us about, you know, what those guys have been like to work with.
You know, it's an insane sort of thing when I think back to when I was 26 and buying a one-way ticket and sitting on the runway on that Qantas plane, flying over here, thinking, where am I going to end up? To be fair, the people I contacted when I first arrived here were League One and League Two and Championship teams, and it was knocking on doors and making phone calls just to engage and meet people to see what opportunities there are here. So to actually land on my feet, so to speak, and then end up at a Premier League club and live where I was at the time, it's basically 10 minutes down the road. So a lot of things sort of interlinked, and it worked out very well. So, you know, and then the managers you work with as well, how that ties in and who I've worked with, it's just been an incredible situation in terms of who I've worked with and the experience. And then it got to a point where I came here as a sports scientist, and then suddenly you work with these managers and you see, you sort of flick a switch internally and go, that coaching sort of desire as well, because you do know the game, the sports science background, but then suddenly you think, I might have a crack at this coaching as well, and you start to develop and you listen and you learn and you observe over the last 8 years, and it's quite interesting how it works out, to be fair.
Has there been any particular, you know, matches or experiences that stand out? I mean, obviously there's the UEFA Cup final there against Atletico Madrid. There's some really high finishes in the Premier League as well. Yeah, it's weird. We speak with a lot of people who are involved in that who are now left the club and have become really good friends of mine. We actually don't remember the games necessarily. We remember that it's the old cliche, remember the journey. And at the time, we didn't realise what was happening. We were so busy. We didn't have days off for about 6 months at a time with the Europa League, the FA Cup, and the Premier League fixtures. So we actually didn't have any time off. So you don't get to enjoy it, and as they say, coaches say, celebrate small successes and stuff like that. We never did. We were on to the next fixture. For example, we beat Juventus 4-1, and I think we had to play Sunderland away on the Sunday afternoon. So it's not as if you go out and celebrate that type of victory. It gets you through to the next phase, and it's such an emotional night, and it's such a big game. You think, what's a special night? But certainly the Europa League, I get tingles whenever I think about it now. I just think the final, we actually went there twice, so Roy was so superstitious. We stayed at the same hotel, we had the same hotel room, so it actually helped us with our preparation because we were so familiar with the environment. I didn't train there at all, but same hotel, same food, same structure, the whole thing was exactly the same, and that helped us with our preparation. But then the game, I mean, it's weird. Forget the game itself. I couldn't tell you one passage to play with it apart from the goals because you're so enthralled in it. But I remember driving down the main street to the stadium, and the crowd was no one, and then suddenly it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the Atletico fans, our fans were the other side of the stadium, and we could drive on this side, and they were actually rocking the bus and throwing stuff at the buses. And it was at that point you think, this is special. This is actually, and it's not until later on you start to think, wow, that was a special experience in terms of final atmosphere. You go to a Premier League game, we've always got high expectations and atmosphere attached, but the final, in a Europa League final, is just incredible for me. So then you go into the stadium and the fans are rocking, it was a party atmosphere. I remember there was a time, you know that song Black Eyed Peas came on, that tonight's going to be a good night. Yes, I got a feeling.
I got a feeling that song came on, and honestly, God, I've never seen senior players like Danny Murphy, Breda Hangeland, the senior group just suddenly stopped. We were doing the possession, we were taking the possession session, and then that song came on, and we actually just stopped it and looked around the stadium. And for me, I still get tingles on the back of my neck when I actually think of that experience, because it was just synonymous with the rides, the journey we've been on, and then to end in such a stadium, and the stadium's actually like a baseball stadium. It's high, so everyone's actually above the level of the ground, so it gives you this sort of amphitheatre experience. And to lose, listen, it's horrible because you only get one crack at these things, and you think, imagine having a Europa League medal. It's a winner at 27, and when I do look back now, I think, how did I manage that at 27, 28, being a Europa League final? And I pinch myself slightly, but at the time you think, oh, these will happen, and we haven't been nowhere near it since. So looking back, that's now where I think, oh wow.
One of those key players in that team was obviously Mark Schwarzer. I mean, a legend in Australian football. What was it like to work with him?
Mark was a revelation at the club. He took the club to a completely different level. He changed his mentality when he arrived at the club as well. He saw it as a transition, one to live in London and continue his career in the Premier League, but he really stepped up from a leadership perspective. I remember the speech he made in the dressing room before the game, and honest to God, he had the floor. It was dead silent. And he's a big man as it is, and then he had this speech. He must have practiced it about 1,000 times in the mirror, and he'll kill me for that, right? But honest to God, it had everyone on edge and had us so focused for that game, that final alone. And that wasn't the only time he did that. He was that type of figure in the dressing room. He felt, one, that Fulham was a part of him, and he believed in the culture and the values that Roy put into it. So when a player does feel that, you see it and you feel it, he's there for a purpose. He was a massive impact on me as well, because it was Mark Schwarzer. You know, he was a national team goalkeeper, big figure publicly, and it was nice for me to have him there as well and learn off. I was a coach, he was a player, but his work ethic alone, that drive me along as well.
Obviously at Fulham it's been, you know, a tough 12 months, you know, 3 managers, relegation, and another, you know, tough start to the championship, but things have stabilised a bit now. I mean, how do you look back at the past year?
Probably the hardest because as you go up the ranks a little bit, your responsibility increases, and therefore your head's above the chopping block. So the risk of losing your job and waking up and seeing breaking news and new managers gone and new ones coming in and being uncertain of your situation thereafter, that's a challenging one. But if I'm going to remain in football and if I'm going to become a head coach, that's going to happen. It's going to be my name in head breaking news one day that's getting the tic tac. So you've got to be open to it. But building the relationships with new managers who come in and getting to know them quite quickly and understanding their principles, it's huge, and it all comes down to get to know each other. But the thing that stays constant is the football, and we need to be successful. It's definitely the hardest year, definitely the hardest 12 months in my career at Fulham, no doubt about it.
Apart from Mark Schwarzer, you've had a number of Australians also at the club, but quite a few at the moment. I mean, one who was here not too long ago, Gameiro. I mean, what was Corey like? He seems to be doing well now at the A-League.
Corey used to come and train with the first team occasionally when he was obviously with the under-21s, but he used to step up with us and train, and he was one of those ones that no one wanted to train against. As I said to you before, in a 5v5, he was the one that was tackling and chasing you down, so it was always like, you stay away, Brett Hangeland, for example, in the centre, stay away from him because he's so intense in his training and his work ethic. I'm not surprised he's been successful now. It's good to see these young guys making a decision and not possibly staying in Europe and not being happy, because ultimately if you're in football you've got to be happy, and that's when you get the most successful. So going home was probably for him a very good decision, because as you know, if you've spoken to him, as you have, you know he is very Australian, and he stuck out like a sore thumb here in terms of how Australian he was. So I'm happy for him that he's scoring goals and he's performing the way he has, but there's no doubt he would have learnt a lot from Del Piero and these types of guys as well over the last couple of years.
And 2 others who have been in the junior ranks are coming in now, Cameron Burgess and Ryan Williams. I mean, Cameron started the season, he's been off for the young SOCCEROOs and come back. I mean, seems to be a kid with a lot of potential. Yeah, Cameron was nowhere near the first team initially when Felix arrived, and then Felix actually asked me who in the junior system, who should we actually bring up and have a look at. And there are only a couple of people, and he was certainly one, because I watched him in the Youth League Cup last year. And what attracted me to Cameron was his distribution and his calm composure at playing out from the back. And I knew how Felix wanted to play. It was a controlling type game in terms of how we play, and I knew he could do it. Now, whether or not it was right or wrong at the time, it's been an incredible situation for him and the experience. And you know, whether or not he has to step back a gear now and then continue his development, he's done that. He's made his debut, and I think long term it will help him out, because it was high expectation and pressure at the time. Promising young talent. He'll be in the senior team for another 12 to 18 months, I'm sure, as a regular if he stays at Fulham. But it's good to see that he's chosen Australia to play for and not Scotland, because I know he's got heritage there. As for Ryan's been in and around the club for a couple of years now. Been out on loan a few times. He's a great young guy. He works hard. He knows what his deficiencies are. Felix sort of manipulated him how he plays. He's spoken to you about playing wide right, number 10, central midfield and things like that as well. But he can be versatile. And it's just the mentality, I think, of, okay, I'm here to play football. I want to learn. And I think both of them have that sort of
understanding I'm still here learning, you know, and that's the most important thing.
And a recent recruit, obviously fresh from the World Cup, Taggart, came from Golden Boot in the A-League, and then World Cup, but obviously picked up an injury and hasn't featured. I mean, how's he coming back from that injury?
Adam's recovering quite well. He's worked quite hard. Unfortunately for him, he trained 3 or 4 days in a row when he first arrived, and then it just became a snowball effect for him, and he hasn't trained since. So at the moment he's doing his individual rehabilitation, and he's starting his technical work today. So probably within 6 to 8 weeks he'll be back training, which will be good for him, because I could imagine being his age, moving to a new country, new environment. Although you've got your best mate from Perth, that's great, but you want to be playing football, and if you are bought from somewhere and you're plucked from obscurity, Newcastle Jets for example, and from the World Cup to play in the Championship and an ex-Premier League club, you want to have an impact at some point. So to be sitting there on the treatment bed day in, day out, and not being able to perform and actually show your colleagues, you know, what potential you have, if your skill level, whatever it may well be, it's a case of like, well, it must be quite disappointing for him. So.
And yourself, I mean, it's been an amazing 8 years of great experiences being in the Premier League. What's in store for you long term? You want to get into a head coaching role at some point, and have you been keeping an eye on the A-League, which has been growing the last couple of years?
Probably in the last 12 months I've been looking at the A-League a lot more, because I felt that I'm getting to a point after the 6 or 7 managers, I've thought to myself, I wouldn't mind a crack at this, because I've learned so much, and you sort of put your principles together and you think, okay, so maybe it's time to maybe step away from the comfort zone of being at Fulham for so long, and seeing the transition of the club. We've gone through so many different sort of cycles, the relegation battle to success, back to relegation, now we're pushing for promotion. So it's a case of, well, to be a part of that, or go and challenge yourself elsewhere. That will come back to me, and that opportunity will rise at some point. A-League's certainly an avenue, because I do miss my family and friends. Now I wouldn't be moving back certainly just for them, and be a professional move also. But as I said, we went to a game actually with the SOCCEROO. They took us and watched Western Sydney and the Melbourne Victory. I'm sitting in the stands, I actually sat by myself watching it, because I wanted to feel the atmosphere and see what it was all about. And I can't tell you how pleasing it was, how the game had developed, not only the standard, but the people that wanted to come to the play. Because the previous game that I went to was Melbourne Victory versus Sydney, I think it was, in the first game that Melbourne Victory played at Olympic Park. So that was 10 years ago. So they're the only 2 games I managed to get to with living over here. So to see it develop, passion from the crowd, I thought, although England is great, and it's been great to me, there is definitely a football future back there, and it would still give me the same excitement that this atmosphere does here.
And one of your old players, and one of your mates, DAMIAN, DUFF, has been tearing it up for Melbourne City this season. Yeah. What do you think about him?
We were talking about him before, and you just think his passion for football would blow your mind. He's pretty. Listen, he'd play for free still. The guy would continue to play for free, and having moved his family over to Australia just shows his decision was based purely on football. I had no doubt he was going to be successful there, through his energy and his capacity, but his ability.